Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? We have a quick math session today, and no, you don't have to know actual maths. The only thing that you have to know is that 2 level 4 monsters make 1 rank 4 Xyz, because we don't even run the synchros in here. We do not care about any of this shenanigans. We are just here to do the crazy, well, I don't want to say broken combo, but one of the strongest combos that are in the game right now, in my personal opinion. And Mathmech have shown that on the ladder before. Sprite and Tearlaments came out. Yes, let's not talk about that one, but yeah. Let's start right off with the card by card. 1 Ash Blossom, because you basically get this card for free, so don't count it towards the count. And obviously, especially if you are forced to go second, these kind of cards come in very handy. You all get them in the Master Pack bundles. You only pay 750 gems, you get 10 packs, and you get one of these for free. Same applies to Nibiru. I put this in here because I assume most people would have it by now, and yes, this card is very strong for going second, so I would include it in specifically these decks that are a bit more meta relevant in general. So you have options that you can be running. If you don't want to be running any of these, there are obviously other options. You can be running Triple Book of Moon and then be still absolutely fine. It's not crazy because against other link decks it doesn't do all that much, but this would be a budget option if you want to not run stuff like Nibiru because you haven't invested in it yet. Same thing for Forbidden Droplet and Infinite Impermanence. Very good cards going first and going second. Nibiru not so much going first, but it's still possible. And yeah, the other ones very strong in both cases, so you would want to be running them because you get them basically for free. But if you don't have them, Book of Moon is another card that you can consider going first and going second, and before you craft any of the expensive stuff, or just in general because it's a budget option. Triple Danger Mothman, and there's a reason for this. You don't have many cards in hand that you care that much about discarding, so it's not too bad if you hit anything else but itself. If you hit itself, it's a bit tragic because you want this body on board and then draw into another card, hopefully draw into Circular by this. But this card is very important. First of all, it's a bridge for a small world, which gets you into Mathmech Circular and basically any other of your level 4 monsters, because this one isn't Cyberse, it's level 4 and it's dark. No other monster is dark, and the attack stats also do not have an issue with any of the other Mathmechs. So with this one as a bridge, you can basically get into any other Mathmech monster, because we do not run Nibiru. This would be the only one that would have a bit of an issue because it is dark as well. So this one a good bridge and good level 4 extender, because we try to get level 4 monsters on board without normal summoning, because that is very important in this deck, and I'll get to why that is in a second. Decided to run 1 Mathmech Sigma. You can run 2 or 3. If you have it, then play it. If you don't have it, you don't need it, because mainly you want to be sending this card to the graveyard by Circular's effect, and it doesn't even matter if Tearlaments, for example, mill it beforehand, because then you can still activate the effect in the graveyard. The only issue comes in hand with some of the graveyard manipulation stuff, and yeah, Mathmech have a bit of an issue playing against decks that don't let you use the graveyard, because they are obviously trying to deal with Tearlaments, and if this deck deals with Tearlaments, then they also deal with Mathmech basically, because this one is essential part of the combo that you send this to the graveyard so you can special summon it out from there. Also, one other card thing to mention, or two, this card locks you into special summoning Cyberse monsters from the extra deck, at least from the extra deck. Let's keep that one in mind, because you have other cards in here that aren't from the extra deck. And also, this card banishes itself when it is used, well, when it's leaving the field, unless it is part of an Xyz monster and then goes to the graveyard. Then I think it will still stay in the graveyard. And that's very important for one specific, I don't want to say combo, but for one specific scenario, because there will be a scenario if you ever go into one of your searchers, the Alambertian, with 2 monsters that aren't Mathmechs, because then you lack 1/3 Mathmech in your graveyard, because this one banishes itself, and that's a bit annoying. So you want this card in the graveyard most of the time if you didn't draw into any other Mathmech card besides your combo. Mathmech Addition, very important here. I do run it at 3 in the competitive versions. A lot of people only run them at 2. Addition and Subtraction are mainly in here for the same reason, because you can target one face-up monster in the field. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except Cyberse monsters, and you special summon this card from your hand. Cannot attack, who cares? It's mainly on here to get another level 4 body on board without using your normal summon, because then you can still go into your Alambertian and do your plays, search Circular, and then with Circular start the combos. And Wicckid effect, you want to be searching one of the other ones, Diameter, because this card, then you can normal summon and target one level 4 Cyberse monster in graveyard, special summon, and so on and so on, because you want this card in the graveyard because this is part of your crazy special summon combo. And that's the good thing. If you run multiple Sigma and you draw into Sigma, then you don't have to send Sigma, then you can send Diameter, and the combo is saved without having to do the whole Wicckid shenanigans as well. I decided to run one Mathmech Multiplication. It technically can come up. Circular can send it to the graveyard. You can link this off. When you normal summon this card, then you can link it off into Nibiru, and then you can start, for example, parallel Exceed combo. So this card has its purpose in here as well. It's another Mathmech name, but if you have Nebula, you would probably want to rather be playing this one than this one. This is also somewhat funny if you play it in combination with like Final Sigma and whatnots, and it can help you OTKing with things like Decode Talker or Raster Liger in combination with Update Jammer as well if you wanted to. So it has, well, some usages in this deck, but isn't one of the necessary cards. Talking about necessary cards, Diameter definitely is one. Not only can it summon one card back from your graveyard, it can also do so much more, because if it's used for Mathmech monster of an Exis or a Synchro Summon, then you can, the turn that this is Synchro Summoned, I think, then you can use the effect once per turn. During the turn this card was special summoned. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can negate that effect. So technically this can help you not only against your opponent's hand traps, not really maxi, but technically stopping some of your Exis plays effect. And also this can help you during your opponent's turn, because you summon it back with Superfactorial, and then you use it during your opponent's turn to Exis summon a monster. So you have another Omni negate that doesn't destroy, but it's still an Omni negate, so that's very, very, very strong, especially against your opponent's spell traps. Although usually you don't want to use Superfactorial on your opponent's start of the turn, because then they, well, can play around the whole thing, and you don't get to get rid of one of their monsters on board with the other effect of Liplation, and so on and so on and so on. So because Liplation is also good if you summon it during your opponent's turn, so you have to watch out a little bit, because sometimes power spell cards can stop you from doing something useful, and yeah, there's a whole thing around this. But Diameter, very, very strong card, and I'm very glad this is a rare. One card you've probably not seen in these kind of decks before, Ascended Sage, and that is for the fact that this card is a level 4 play starter that doesn't need to be normal summoned, or doesn't need you to have a normal summoned monster on board, but it can be normal summoned. So this card either can be used as a play starter, I don't want to say, if you have to normal summon a level 4 monster, and it can also be used as a first body on board that then you can use addition or subtraction on, so that gets you into lots of stuff as well. And obviously it is cheap. 2 Mathmech Circular, you can, if you really want to, if you really just want to try out the deck, you can shave this card down to 1 if you want to. I've tried it out, it works, but obviously you'd want to run this card at like 20 if you have it. I felt like 2 was a bit of the sweet spot in the end, because it gives you more options of actually drawing into it, and it adds to your Mathmech, well, name count sometimes as well, so that's not too bad, and it enables you to have plays during your next turn as well if you have it still in hand, or if you add it to your hand with anything else, then this can be helpful. But you can shave it down to 1 if you wanted to play it as cheap as possible, or really as cheap as possible. Shave down one of them and add multiple on later on if you really like this deck. I decided to run 2 parallel Exis. First of all, it can be used as a bridge for Small World, and also this card can extend. The only issue with it is that you can't really use it as a play starter, because you already need to have Link summoned, and to Link summon you need to either have one Mathmech monster that you normal summon and then go into Nibiru, so then you can go into this, and then you can go into cards like Alan Bershan, I think, yes, Alan Bershan is the searcher, and then you can keep on going. I always get confused because I thought this would be the ultra rare and this would be the super rare, so this is what irritates me between those 2 cards. But if you run 3, it will be a brick in your hand a lot of the time, because a lot of the time you won't be going to links till much later on, and at that point later on you don't need them anymore, because you don't run the crazy combos that you can be doing with Splash Mage and then IP Masquerena and so on and so on and so on. There's lots of stuff you can be doing even after you do your basic combo that sets up a Superfactorial, but we don't really care about that all too much, so it doesn't do all that much, but it's still worth being played in this deck. Already talked about Nibiru. Monster Reborn, very, very good to extend. combos, because that can be very helpful. Cynet Mining, very, very important card because it searches you Circular, it draws Ash Blossoms from time to time, that's quite important, and it searches you any other Cyberse monster as well if you want to. Mathmech Equation, kind of like Monster Reborn, but for Mathmechs, and it's searchable, so I would include a 1, plus the attack gain by 1000 isn't always too bad. You can special summon the Exist monsters from your graveyard as well, and then you would have a 3000 attack point beat stick with Equation, so that is not too bad either. We have Small World mainly to be searching Circular, but technically you can also use it to search stuff like Diameter if you really want to, and also fetches Ash Blossom, so we have that. Forbidden Chalice, very, very good card because it's, well, it fills up your hand trap slot. This is one of these decks that have lots of one card play starters, and then you can just fill up the rest of the slots with like good stuff cards that do stuff during opponent's turn or during your turn, whatever you want it to do. So things like Maxi will obviously be good, triple Ash Blossom, and nowadays you can do Graveyard Disruption with Ghost Bell, DD Crow, all these kind of things are somewhat important as well, but I don't really want to include them in here because if Telements cease existing at one point, then I still want this deck profile to be at least somewhat relevant, because I don't think any of the Mathmech stuff is really going to get hit at all. Cynet Crosswipe, very, very important in this deck as well, because you will be ending on a board that has possibly some leftovers, I like to call them, that you didn't really use because you don't have access to the crazy combos with IP in this deck. So this one, very, very nice thing to get rid of one card on your opponent's field. Doesn't have to be face up, doesn't have to be monster, so very, very nice removal. And it can technically also be used going second because it's a quick spell, and yeah, sometimes it's okay to just normal summon one of Mathmech, then get rid of it, and then start your combos with some of the other cards in hand that work anyway. So yes, you can use this, plus still works with Monster Reborn and Equation, so very, very neat budget card for this specific deck. Already talked about those two. Superfactorial, very, very important card. You usually want to search this one out unless you already have it in hand. Then I included Induction as well. Usually wouldn't be playing this in a very, very competitive deck, but in a budget deck this works a lot better than it should, because if you have Superfactorial, then you can use the search of Circular to go into Induction, and Induction then still is a pop during opponent's turn. You have to watch out a bit with how the effect works, but that's fine. And Superfactorial summons you Laplation during your opponent's turn. If you have 3 Mathmech monsters with different names in your graveyard, very important, that is also sometimes a bit of an issue. Technically 2 is fine, but then you could only go into Alambertion, and then Alambertion's effect doesn't really matter during your opponent's turn. It could work if you have 2 Alambertions in your extra deck and you have 1 Diameter, then you at least have 1 negate on board with this. Not too bad either, but usually you want to use it for the different one. You can technically also go into a Synchro monster, but you usually don't want to. For the extra deck, just some rank 4 budget good stuff. I felt like this one worked out from time to time, and the attack value isn't too bad, but obviously run different things. Firewall Exit Dragon is a card that you do need, not for the effect and not even for the attack stats, but you need this card because sometimes you have to send Sigma to the graveyard, so you have another name in graveyard, and then you can just exist 2 monsters, go into this one, then link this one off into Wicckid with one of the other Mathmech cards, and then hopefully you have another extender, because then you need the other extender to draw into Diameter, and then Diameter you can normal summon, hopefully, if you have done the combo right, or if you open it with the right cards in hand, and then you can still keep on going. But you see, usually you don't want to start your combo with these 2 monsters, for example, and no Mathmechs, because that can be problematic. Doesn't happen a lot of the time, but in like 1 out of 100 games this can be an issue, and then you can have this card in here. Also, the effect works to bring back 1 Link for Cyberse Link monster in your graveyard. Very, very weird that it is specified Link for Cyberse Link monster, because what else would a Link 4 monster be? It is what it is. You can get Raster Liger back and then go for another OTK, because you can boost the attack or pop stuff, and there is that. One of the main play cards, obviously Laplation, because during opponent's turn you can use the effect, because when it's summoned, send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, send 1 monster your opponent controls to the graveyard, so it doesn't target and it doesn't destroy, very, very important, and send 1 spell trap card your opponent controls to the graveyard. Usually doesn't come up that much, but you have that, and then with Diameter you have the negate as well. Alimbersion is your card that searches you out your circular. That's why we run the whole rank 4 engine. If you don't have any of the other searchers, or you didn't draw into it the hard way, then you can do this. And there's some other combos you can be doing, because you can tribute one monster, special summon one level 4 Mathmech monster from your hand or graveyard. So from your hand works as well. So if you have things like multiplication in your hand, you can still extend from your hand then and get more monsters into play. Sadly, Diameter doesn't trigger on special summon, so that doesn't matter all that much. And with this effect, you can technically tribute Link Devotee and then summon the 2 tokens. It's a niche thing that you can be doing, but it is possible if you want to be doing some link climbing, where you can't link climb all that much, because this card, when it's special summoned, not even when it's link summoned, when it's special summoned, you cannot link summon link 3 or higher link monsters. So this usually works quite well with stuff like Masquerena, for example. But yeah, I wanted to include it in here just to have mentioned it. So this one, very, very nice. Technically, the other effects can come up, but the @1 Mathmech card will be the most important one, because it adds you Disruption or it adds you Circular, whatever you need at this point. Asophiel, just for going second, so have not one more rank 4, although it's not a Cyberse, so keep that in mind. Already talked about this card. This card's good against trap cards, and it can be good to link off certain things, because this one needs one level 4 lower Cyberse monster, so very, very nice. The second effect we can ignore. Pentastack can come in handy. It's a Cyberse monster, first of all, and you can do piercing damage, which is sometimes helpful. Another card that I decided to include, because it can help you for the next turn, is Restoration Point Guard. Not because it's a good card, but sometimes if another link monster is link summoned, this card cannot be destroyed. That doesn't really matter, but if a link summoned monster was link summoned using this card as material, is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, while this card is in the graveyard, you can special summon this card. So you can more easily go into link 3s or link 4s during your next turn if your opponent then doesn't clear this card. And yeah, that's one of the reasons, because you will sometimes have lots of materials on board during your first turn, don't really know what to do with it, so technically you could use that one. One of the more important cards is Wicckid. You can run 2 of it if you want to. I decided not to, but in the end you can, because this card it cannot be destroyed by battle, which is quite funny, but that doesn't really matter all that much, because Cyberse monsters this card points to cannot be destroyed by card effects, important. And the most important, if a monster is special summoned to zones this card points to while you control this monster, you can banish one Cyberse monster from your graveyard. Mainly it will be Alimbersion, just saying that now. You don't want to be banishing your other Mathmechs, because then you can't use the effects. And then you can add one Cyberse tuner from your deck to your hand. If you'd be playing Nibla, whatever you want to call it, then you can technically also search this one, but mainly you want to be searching Diameter. And if you haven't normal summoned so far this turn, which sounds like this isn't going to happen, but it will happen a lot of the time, then you can still go into these combos as well. Update Jammer, very important, because this card plus this card and your opponent have no monsters on board is a straight ODK, so that is very, very nice to have. And you only need 2 level 2 or higher Cyberse monsters, very, very good. Track Black can come in handy, it's also a Cyberse monster. Then we have Decode Talker, we have Power Code Talker, just can be coming in handy from time to time, but there's obviously good stuff you can be running. Splash Mage, very important for this deck. Transcode Talker, very important. Access Code Talker, very important. Even Decode Talker Heat, so there's combos where you can go into this. Makes more sense if you run a higher hand trap count, because then the effect of drawing 1 card isn't too bad either. And there's combos that you can do with IP Masquerena to then go into at least a 2 material Appaloosa during your opponent's turn, which isn't too bad. And Goddess of the Underworld and all kinds of shenanigans. Nightmare Unicorn you can also run if you want to. Other cards obviously called But the Grave, because hand traps can be very annoying, so if you have it, you will find space somewhere in your deck. Alright, let's give this deck a nice little rating when it comes to power level and strength. This specific list, I would say very, very high on the 3 scale. I would say like 3 out of 5, but a very, very high 3 out of 5. Because if the combos go through, this deck is fairly decent. It has a negate, it has a send to the graveyard, it has some stuff to stay alive. You have very, very much space for generic removal cards. It's all in all a better version of Marincess in a lot of cases. But it obviously has the issue of, if your main combo doesn't go through, you're kind of stuck on some nonsense, and then during the next turn you lack certain extra deck monsters because you don't run 2-offs of lots of important cards, and you have some issues to stay relevant then, because you cannot as easily OTK as some of the more competitive variants. But overall, this borders very much to a 4. I didn't feel like I should give it a 4, because I did have a bit of a hard time in ranked against certain decks, so I felt like maybe leave it at a very high 3 and think this would make most people happy, because it's the most accurate description of this deck. when we talk about consistency, the deck is fairly consistent. You see lots of searchers in here. They have an extra deck monster that's a searcher, so you can consistently go into your combo, but hand traps hamper it a lot, so that's a bit difficult. And there will be the occasional brick hand where we just draw disruptions, or where you just draw monsters that don't really do that much, and once your opponent hits you with any good hand trap, basically Ash Blossom, Impermanence, Veiler, all of these can be very upsetting, then your turn is nearly over. There are some extenders, but yeah, usually it's kind of over. So I would say, like, considering that you run quite a lot of cards that make it consistent, I'd say like a very, very, very low 4, but it is still very consistent in what it tries to do. But the whole hand trap thing, stopping the plays nearly completely, can take away from this a little bit. When it comes to budget value, I would say it's fairly high. The thing is, you have to run like 5 ultra rares. You can cut it down to 4, but you have to run 5 ultra rares. But Cynet Mining is a card that you get for free for 1000 gems in the Salamangreat Structure Deck, and you can make a Salamangreat deck, a functioning one with that one as well, so it's not even wasted money. So with this one, we can already shave down to ultra rares basically, because you get them somewhat for free. And also, this deck in general is, well, it's not really splashable, but you can technically run the whole circular Mathmech combo in some other Cyberse decks. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do so. And also, not very many super rares needed, and the super rares that are needed are fairly decent in other kind of decks. The extra deck monsters for Mathmech can technically be run in other rank 4 decks. It's not really necessary, but you could do it. There are some that do. Nibiru can be run in other decks, so it's not too bad either. And Small World, obviously, a very, very good card. So the only super rare that really only works in Mathmech builds is Sigma. And other than that, you are very, very, very good budget-wise. So I would give this deck a very high 4 out of 5. It is still lacking on some sorts, but you could also say a very, very low 5 out of 5. But I am going to go with a very high 4 out of 5, because the deck is still a tiny bit more expensive than maybe other ones on the ultra rare front, but it doesn't overly matter too much, and you can upgrade this deck fairly easily to a, well, a competitive menace at least. It's going to be doing somewhat well. It's not awful. And last but not least, the gameplay section. This time only with one replay, because I will be making a 10 ranked games in a row session with this specific deck, because I really like playing it. I wanted to see how good it can do, and I wanted to show you how good it can do. So there's going to be that. So just one to see the basic combo, well, ish, because after you do the basic combo, then it's kind of up to you what you want to be doing from that point onwards. So let's just have a little look of what is happening here. I had to normal summon Diameter because I did not have any access to the Exosister monster going into it without normal summoning. So this is technically already a tiny bit worse than it could be, but in the end it didn't matter all that much. The opponent, I think, uses Max E here, so we have an Ash Blossom just for that purposes. Luckily half drawn into Ash Blossom. Usually this might have screwed you up a bit, and you can count the special summons with me if you want to. So you can see how many cards your opponent would have gotten, like necessary cards on here. One of them would be now, and now is the second one, because we definitely need those, which are a bit annoying. We have to go into Alan version here because we search some stuff. Technically we could have just, after they used Maxi, stopped and set Forbidden Chalice and just ended it, which is possibly makes more sense to do so. I don't know, I still have very hard time dealing with Maxi in general. Now we use the effect here to search Circular. Circular we will be using the effect of. We send to the graveyard Sigma, because Sigma is very nice, and definitely not a joke at all. No memes are a part of this gameplay. We have Mathmech Circular's second effect now that can add 1 trap to the hand. Obviously this is going to be Superfactorial, because Superfactorial makes you be able to go into place during your opponent's turn. And now we link this off into Cyberse Wicckid. So we already had like, what, it was like 5 special summons now at this point. So your opponent would have drawn infinite amount of cards. Now I use the effect of Alan Burst. Wouldn't have usually done this if Maxi was up, but since Maxi wasn't up, I could easily do this. Summon the card back for Cyberse Wicckid. Wicckid can now add to the hand 1 Diameter for the next turn, very important. And now we can link off Circular again. We banished Alan Burst for the Wicckid effect, and now I can link off Circular to have the trap disruption, because evenly matched is very, 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 very playable at the moment, especially against Tailments and whatnots. The card is played a lot more often than it used to be, and having one of the Lingo Rebos against it, so they can't just be like, oh, battle phase, main phase question mark. And yeah, so this can be very helpful with this one, because this is a trap card negate. Very, very nice. And you banish it as well, not that it usually matters, but with some decks like Labyrinth it can matter. So there is that one. We have now the set of Superfactorial, we have Chalice. I could have continued here with Monster Reborn, but since the extra deck doesn't have any cards that do anything during opponent's turn, I just wanted to keep that for the next turn, so I have multiple extenders and can possibly OTK my opponent from that point onwards. They are playing Blue Eyes, getting Bingo Machine Go, wanting to go into any of the Chaos Max things. They actually got the one that wasn't the ritual monster, but is Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon. We then have some fun with them because they didn't read the effect of Cyberse Wicckid, and for some reason they tried to get rid of Linkuriboh. I don't think they even had a trap card, but they just felt like this card was a bit better. But Wicckid makes it so it cannot be destroyed by card effect, so their effect is out of play, and they cannot attack with this monster now as well, which would have, I don't want to say it would have put us into any spot of bother, but it wouldn't have been very helpful for us. I could have, after they used that effect, used Superfactorial, getting rid of this card to have my negate up, so they wouldn't even been able to do Branded Fusion. Might have been a tiny bit better here because we would have reduced the hand as well, possibly even hit Branded Fusion. So you could have decided on, once they have a monster on board, actually going for a Superfactorial, so clear their board and have a negate up and decimate their hand would have been something to consider here. I didn't do it. They go into the branded stuff, and I can negate the branded stuff here, so they cannot go into the one that would hurt me a little bit. They can also only summon fusion monsters from now on, and Blue Eyes have some, but I doubt that they were going to do something too crazy. They go into the battle phase. I know they can't attack with this card, so I fire the Superfactorial here now, because then I can send this to the graveyard, and then we can do some shenanigans with this one, which is not too bad, because now we have another negate up in case they have something else, which I doubt they did, because otherwise they wouldn't have gone to the battle phase. But we do have it up now. We save our Linkuriboh for the next turn for some link plays, not that it overly matters, and we get rid of the Blue Eyes in hand. Well, it is what it is. They also have sent to the graveyard the White Stone of Ancients, so I will negate this one. I don't know why they didn't use the second effect of this one, because during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard, because it was sent there this turn, you can add one branded spell directly from your deck. Either they only play one Branded Fusion, but I don't quite understand it, or they didn't want to use that effect there. Wouldn't have really mattered because we had a trap negate. They couldn't have used Branded in red, because Branded in red doesn't really do much for their deck, and if they used Branded Fusion, they wouldn't have been able to use that anyway the next turn. They could have chain blocked it with the White Stone, but even that wouldn't have made much of a difference how many monsters they would have had on board, because we have plenty of ways of finishing this deck. Going into Diameter combo, using Monster Reborn here, just getting some monsters on board, and then going into the link plays. I decided to go the route with Decode Talker, then use Decode Talker with Update Jammer, and then Update Jammer with Decode Talker to go into Raster Liger. Now this card can attack twice, and I summon it over that zone, so I can Tribute Circular to pop the Blue Eyes and have very, very, very much game on board. Now I will raise the attack by 2,300 as well, and this card, since this card can attack twice, we have game on board here. Very, very good. Very, very easy OTK. This is roundabout how you want your duels to go. Obviously, there will be situations where it's not going to be that easy, and you have to rely on certain other stuff. We still had Forbidden Droplet on here, and other ways of dealing with things, but you can already see you run out of plays in the extra deck, because we wouldn't have been able to set up better plays the next turn, because we can't do the Superfactorial again, because our extra deck doesn't do this, and so on and so on and so on. So in a grind game, this deck has some issues, because if you can't finish it now, then you might not be able to put up very many more disruptions for your opponent's next turn. That can be problematic, because you don't really have card draw either. So there's that. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile replay. Give it a like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.